Alright y'all, it's time for another KSC flyover with NASA spaceflight. This time we caught things hanging out on launch and landing pads. The Cape Mechazilla is coming together, stay tuned to see which part forms the head, and it looks like SpaceX got a discount on a barge. Headed to Starbase maybe? In fact, there's so much to explain in this video, I've enlisted some help this time. Please welcome Mr. Alejandro Alcantarilla Romera and Mr. Adrian Beil, who's going to be helping me fill in some details on this flyover. You may have heard their voices on live streams before. Let's get into it. Real quick, thanks to Brilliant.org for sponsoring this video. More on them later. Let's start over at the landing zones. If you watched our coverage of the Falcon Heavy launch, this may be a somewhat familiar sight, just from a little more altitude. You can actually see that during our flyover, we caught both of the side boosters from that Falcon Heavy mission on the landing pads. Now, a couple really interesting things to point out here. Let's zoom in a little bit and check it out. You can see that over on the right-hand side, we've got a booster that looks like it might not have hit dead center. But look a little bit closer at the booster. They've already done some work on it. If you look up at the top of it, it's actually been crowned best booster ever. They've put a little lifting ring on the top. Well, why do they need a lifting ring? The boosters are different than normal Falcon center cores because the center cores normally have the stage 2 on top of them. So the center core of a regular Falcon 9 or a Falcon Heavy is flat on top. The boosters on the side of a Falcon Heavy, however, they've got nose cones. So if you've got a flat cap that you use to pick up regular center cores, it doesn't work very well when the nose cone's in the way. So we can see here they've already brought the crane over there and they've already attached the lifting ring, lifting crown. I don't know, SpaceX, you tell me what you want me to call it and I'm happy to use it. But they've already attached it to this booster and it looks like they've moved the booster away from where it landed. If we scoot over to the left-hand side, we caught the crane in the act. Like literally it's lowering the lifting ring down over the nose cone on that other booster. You can see there's one of those aerial work platforms, the ops, the high lifts that lift human beings to ridiculous heights so that they can work on things. They've got a lift up next to it. The crane that's sort of yellowish is there and you can see just above the nose cone of the booster, the lifting ring going down around the nose cone. So that was a fantastic thing to see over here at the LZ. For our next category, I'll take things you find on a launch pad, Alex. Here you can actually see the Falcon 9 that flew as part of the GPS-3 SV06 mission. This is booster 1077. Again, doing a little bit of time traveling. That mission has already launched, but now, because we flew before that mission launched, we've got photos of the booster on the pad. Of course, this has completely succeeded in taking that satellite, GPS satellite, up successfully onto its orbit, but it was a treat to fly over and see it out there on Slick 40. If you look at this, there's some interesting construction equipment over here. There's actually what is an excavator right there next to the booster. We spotted it because it's silhouetted by the light booster behind it. But what could SpaceX possibly be excavating at Slick 40? SpaceX. Do you really think we wouldn't watch your live streams and notice? We noticed. Stay tuned and we'll talk more about this in future flyovers as the work proceeds. Circling back to the port, on the flyover, we saw some work being performed on, just read the instructions. Luckily, it says it on the landing pad, on the drone ship itself. There was a big port crane that was lifting some equipment back and forth. We saw the moving pieces here and there. What work were they doing? What sort of maintenance is it? Don't have any official announcement on it, but there is another cool thing that you can see in this aerial photo. Check this out. If you ever heard us mention the Octograbber was out and about. That's that movable robotic securing system, I guess, that when the booster is landed on the drone ship out at sea, they sort of remote control drive this thing under there and it attempts to grab onto the bottom of the booster. And realistically, it's just a really heavy thing that connects to the booster to help it keep from tipping over out when the waves are rocking the drone ship.
I still love the fact that we have a heat map here. I will never get over the fact there's a literal heat map of where the booster land, because you can see where the heat of the booster has damaged the drone ship surface the most. So you can kind of see how accurate SpaceX is with these landings, because they're apparently landing very good in the middle, because that's the area where you can see the most damage.
Don't worry, we've got more SpaceX coming up later in the video, including what's happening over at 39A and Roberts Road. But first, let's head over to LC-16 and see what's going on there. And we can see a structure. We see a couple structures on it, but once again, there's something that's missing. Relativity's working on launching Terran 1, their first rocket, but right now we see sort of their strong back structure transporter erector. Need to give them a call to see what they call it, but we don't see the rocket there right now. We know Relativity is going for launch early this year, so it will be interesting to see exactly how things play out at LC-16.
Right, Das, we saw Terran 1 here on the pad previously, and then Relativity rolled it back. And since then, we are eagerly awaiting the return of that rocket to finally see it launch and maybe be the first methane rocket to reach orbit. So we are still waiting on that, not there yet.
So let's go just outside the gate to KSC and check in on Blue Origin. Adrian, tell us what's going on with Blue Origin.
Yeah, sure does. And I think the interesting part of a Blue Origin is they are building a lot of buildings. If we start on the left side here, we can see everybody loves the warehouse expansion. So there you go. The warehouse expansion is getting a roof. But on the other buildings, if you go above the warehouse, we have what will be the Orbital Reef Pathfinder building, which is on the left side, which is having a concrete floor now. And next to that, we have the vertical assembly area, which has this lattice structure getting ready for being assembled, so they are also progressing on that. I feel like it's fair we talk about this building because it was very much assembled while we started these flyovers, so we could see all the progress on this building, and at this point it seems close to completion. We can see the newly built door is now in, and this is the second stage cleaning and testing facility of Blue Origin. And yeah, it looks very much done. And it was cool to see all this progress.
Back over on the Space Force side, we've got Launch Complex 36. So we saw some stuff while we flew over there. We always give it a look to see if we catch anything out. But right here in white, next to these buildings, that was something that caught our eye. Why did that catch our eye, Adrian?
Well, by some very rough estimates, this is about 7 meters in diameter, which, if you talk about Blue Origin, there's a certain rocket they're developing, New Glenn, which also is 7 meters in diameter.
Aha.
So this, and as we love to watch rings here at NASA Spaceflight, this might be a ring for some sort of New Glenn hardware. It might be another part of a second stage tank, like Jarvis testing. We don't exactly know because it's kind of hard to see from this distance, so invite us please, Blue Origin. But it could be related to, or it's most likely related to New Glenn hardware.
Up next, we'll head over to Roberts Road, but first, a word from Sawyer Rosenstein about Brilliant, the sponsor of this video.
Thanks, Das, and thanks to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. Brilliant.org is the best way to learn about math and science topics, and the best part? It's all interactive. If you're interested in a career in aerospace, or you just want to learn a little bit more about basic rocket science, Brilliant has you covered. Brilliant has thousands of lessons, including one related to this video. Ever wonder how Falcon Heavy knows when to separate the side boosters and relight them? It all starts with simple algorithms. Learn some basic programming like if-then statements, and who knows, you could soon program the next reusable booster. To get started for free, visit brilliant.org/NASA Spaceflight or click the link in the description below. The first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. Now, Das, I'm gonna send it back to you.
As promised, let's get over to Roberts Road. SpaceX must have gotten some sort of, discount on tower segments or something like that, because they've already got one completely assembled tower at 39A, but they have more tower segments hanging out at the yard over at Roberts Road. You may hear that term a lot, Roberts Road. When we say Roberts Road, it's the construction area sort of away from all the launch pads where SpaceX builds and assembles things. And a lot of times we find things that are new, pieces that have moved around, something new that's been built. But here we've got some stuff that's not new. These tower segments have been here for a while. We've already seen SpaceX put up a tower down at Starbase, the orbital launch tower that they've been using to stack the ships and boosters and stuff like that. Starbase Tower has 9 sections.
9 sections.
Thank you. But here we've only got 7. It's a little tough to see from this perspective. So let's switch over to another photo. You can see we've got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but the one in the middle is actually a little bit shorter. We know that in the past, over at Starbase, we've seen that the top tower segment, or the top couple segments, are sometimes a little bit shorter, but we don't see the overhang here yet. We do see the shorter segment, and I'm not exactly sure what that's going to be for. Does anybody have an idea why they may have built one that's a little shorter?
Yeah, that's actually part of the two top segments on the tower. This actually is the bottom one of the two top segments because it has inserts to be able to put another section right on top. You can see it right there at the top of the columns, and you can see on the right the columns that might be for that top section.
Ah, I gotcha. So normally we can see that they're going to stack another segment on top of a tower segment because it's got these bolty things on the top that are sort of sticking up, and that allows you to attach another segment to it. But over on the ground, there's actually a couple segments that don't have those bolts, and that might be something that they're going to assemble for the very top of the tower. So anyways, what we're probably seeing here is most of the components for another tower sitting out at Roberts Road. It's got the 6 full-size segments. It's got one segment that's a little bit shorter in the middle. We see some other legs that may be for the very top, or other segments for the in-between. Is it going to end up with 8 segments, 9 segments in the tower? We'll see. But the real question is, where is this tower going to go?
I mean, so far they have built 2 towers, and they built them close to where they're going, which makes sense because why would you not build it close to where you put it? But on the other hand, it's only 2 towers so far, so there could also be the case that they decide to, oh, we have this production line here right now, let's build another one we totally need at a different place and ship it out. We also know they might expand Cape facilities, so why would you not build Cape facilities and the second Cape tower at the Cape? So it will be interesting to watch these tower segments and where they go, and if they enter a ship or not.
All right, so another thing we spotted while flying over Roberts Road is the area where they were assembling the chopsticks in the carriage that carries them up and down the tower. And conspicuously, there are parts missing from here. Well, we know because we saw it roll right past our cameras, and now we know that it's sitting around at 39A. But here back over at Roberts Road, we have the spot where they originally assembled the carriage and the chopsticks, and it's conspicuously missing. But we also see in the same spot parts for the QD arm. Now, if you're a fan of Starbase, you know that big quick disconnect arm that sort of swings in and out of the way. It's actually used to carry propellants up to the ship. But we've got pieces of the QD arm here at Roberts Road. It's not quite complete. You can see sort of the part that curves around the tower so it can swing out of the way, but it's missing a little end part. Looking at the Starbase one or comparing it to the Starbase one, there should be a little bit more structure over here that actually reaches out and touches the ship, I guess, or attaches to the plates on the ship. You can see that this is pretty far along being built. There's cryo lines on it. There's tubing and piping already installed. Instead of putting it up on the tower and then having to, I don't know, redo all that stuff, they've done it right here while it's on the ground. It's within easy reach. They'll put it on some SPMTs, roll it over, and use it as parts to assemble the tower.
Well, you can actually see right next to the QD arm some pieces that appear to be for chopsticks. Might be for the next set of chopsticks to be installed on that another tower.
All right. So we're pretty sure that these aren't pieces of the chopsticks that were moved to 39A that just got left behind. It's perfectly possible that these pieces may be for another set of chopsticks. So one more thing we should point out, there are some other bits here. They look like they're carriage bits. I knew that I would hear it in the comments if we didn't point it out. They're nice and painted black. They're not rusty, right? But these may be for another carriage that's going to end up somewhere else. Who knows where they're going to end up? But SpaceX is just having a regular construction palooza over here at Roberts Road. So just to get your bearings real quick, we've zoomed out a little bit. We were talking about the chopsticks and QD arm and carriage system back here. But if we back off a little bit, you get this massive building. This is the Star Factory. We got to realize what this is for, right? Think of Boca Chica. Down at Boca, they have tents, like tent 1, 2, 3, yada, yada, yada. And they assemble the parts of the Starship in those tents. So here, referring to this as the Star Factory, this is where they're going to be doing all the work that they do in tents at Boca, putting together the rings, stacking them up, making nose cones. And if you look over on the end of the building, this part of the building is actually tall enough, it looks like, to have not just assembled nose cones, but maybe nose cones plus some cargo section rings or larger components of the starships right here on the assembly line. Now, let's see what's going on at 39A. We're going to start off by talking about the big thing that rolled by. We recently saw carriage segments and chopstick pieces head over and start to be staged for installation on the tower at 39A. You can see those in the picture over this way. You got those big red temporary structures. That's almost like a frame to hold up the chopsticks while it's being assembled. And we've got down on the ground some black parts of the chopsticks themselves, like this. There we go. So you can see there's already here in this photo one or two of the carriage arm segments that are sort of sitting on the red frames there.
They basically go and hold onto the tower on that side, and on the other side of the other red frame section that we see there, that's where the chopsticks are joined to the carriage system. And that carriage system, it's actually the way that the chopsticks can then go up and down. Those grab onto the tower via rails on the tower, and then there's like a pulley system that will be installed later, and we'll be able to pull the carriage system up and down with chopsticks and everything, and then it'll have its own kind of hydraulic system to be able to open up and close the chopsticks so that it can become Megazilla.
Remember, at Starbase, we've seen this thing in action all the time at Starbase, but the carriage system sort of hugs the tower like a little koala bear clinging to the side of the tower. And you can see here that they are starting that assembly on the red structures.
Thanks for planting that image of the koala bear hugging the tower, because I will never be able to unsee that. It's now, it's in my mind.
So another interesting thing in this photo isn't what we see in the photo, but what we don't see in the photo. There's actually some tanks missing that used to be in a couple different locations around 39A. You might not be surprised to know that they rolled past the NASA Space Flight Camera. We have a few of those. So we've located where those tanks actually ended up. If you look back over at the turning basin, you will see that SpaceX has got some sort of discount on moving tanks via sea, I guess, because more and more things have been stockpiled at the turning basin here next to the VAB and right next to our Space Coast Live cameras. The turning basin is right over here next to the NASA VAB. If we zoom in on the map, you can see the big VAB, Saturn V going to the moon from there, shuttles process there, but the turning basin is right here. And what they used to do is carry the larger pieces that were built in other parts of the United States even for the moon rockets and shuttle in via the Banana River. I could actually zoom out and see that. In via the Banana River like this, up through this little channel canal, around the corner and into the turning basin, and then they would unload them there next to the VAB. So there's this parking lot next to the turning basin where SpaceX has been staging all of this equipment. And let's look at a couple different things that you can see in the turning basin real quick. We've got a couple things back here that we think we can identify as water tanks. There's some missing water tanks in aerial photos and satellite imagery of 39A, and they look like they're these. These are actually a little rusty. They look like they may have been there for a little while. There's also some, I'm going to call them clusters, of high pressure tanks. They're sort of smaller tanks so they can hold higher pressures, and they come in like, I don't know, modules of multiple tanks in one module. We see some of those there as well, and we have some old photos that show them over at 39A. We've got a bunch of stuff that's very clearly identified as Deluge system stuff. Yeah, I corrected how I said it because so many people gave me grief in the first video where I said Deluge. It's Deluge. You're welcome. These here are big manifolds and pipes that allow water to be collected and split up or divvied up or whatever you want to say whenever you're moving massive quantities of water from a water storage thing over to, I don't know, the bottom of a rocket so that it doesn't blow the pad up. Got more manifolds over here, and then we see some big tanks. And these big tanks actually have labels on them we've observed to say LN2. LN2 is liquid nitrogen, right? So a couple of these likely going to, well, where?
Near Starbase, though, there's another location, Massey, where they actually transported recently, a couple of months ago, they transported some tanks actually from here, from the Cape, all the way down there. And so it's definitely possible that these tanks are just merely to augment that capability, that capacity of the test site at Massey. And we'll see what happens. Definitely we see on that picture by Jack that, there's some tanks already delivered prior to this. Some of those tanks there were already there at 39A a few months ago.
So I said it's what's not in that first aerial photo. Honestly, it's a little bit easier to see if you look at a satellite photo top down when the stuff was still there. If we go back to this older imagery that we've got on Google Maps, you can see a structure over here at 39A, and there's an old foundation. Is it like historic shuttle heritage hardware? No, there's a foundation over here that was being worked on for a Starship tower. And there were some pipes and plumbing and things like that that seemed to be going towards that foundation before SpaceX, I don't know, wadded that plan up in a ball and then threw it into the waistband, and the stuff just sat there. So if we zoom in even further on this old, again, this is older imagery, we can see some of the stuff that we now see at the turning basin. So down at the bottom, we've got that old Starship tower foundation, and right above it, there's a bunch of these Deluge manifolds, the Deluge piping. I am just having a good time saying Deluge now. 4 water tanks, what might be some clusters of the higher pressure tanks, the smaller tanks that hold higher pressures in clusters like I was mentioning. All the things that we see here on this old imagery, we now see sitting next to the turn basin over there near the VAB. You can see the Starship, the original Starship foundation sort of in this area. This little vertical tank here. We saw that vertical tank on the aerial photo as well, the satellite photo as well. And then the water tanks and the tank clusters are sort of in this area. On our flyover, they're not there anymore. Deluge manifolds, not there. All right, quick update. While we were editing this video, SpaceX did some things. It's not surprising, SpaceX is always doing things. You gotta get videos out fast. But we were actually correct. Barge showed up at the turning basin, they loaded all the stuff aboard it, and now it's being pushed by a tug that has its destination set to Brownsville. Where exactly at Starbase that ends up, we'll see. Also, while we were waiting, ULA's rocket ship delivered the first Vulcan core. We'll be doing a video on that later. And literally, while I'm recording this right now, the chopsticks are being raised to the tower at 39A. So wanted to keep y'all up to date without the video getting too far incorrect, I guess. Real quick, we get a ton of great feedback on the flyovers. It's not cheap to keep them going. We're able to keep doing the flyovers and keep y'all up to date because of y'all's support. One great way you can support us, we've got the merch store. Some things we already talked about. You saw the Falcon Heavy side boosters landed on the LZs. Maybe check out our launch entering landing shirts. We've got shirts that help remind you the proper order to light your engines. We also talked about those boosters coming back from the Falcon Heavy mission. Maybe you like our Falcon Heavy hoodie design. Either way you slice it, we appreciate y'all being a part of community. Thank you so much for all the different ways that y'all support what we do. Anyways, that's going to wrap up us talking about all the cool stuff we saw out at the Cape on this flyover. Once again, first time we tried something like this, let us know down in the comments how we did. Hey, did you see something that we might have missed? Tell us down below. Did you know our mysterious reference on pad 40? Maybe don't put that down there and we'll keep it as a secret for next time. But anyway you slice it, we appreciate y'all watching. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, and we will see you nerds later.